All right, so let's get into this. So we're going to talk about macromolecules. All right. And before we even jump into this section, I just want to say that some of the vocab in this section, particularly, I want you guys to remember that science verbiage worksheet where you are breaking down the prefix and the suffix and then putting it together to create the meaning. All right. So let's get started. So macromolecules, it's literally what it says. So when you the word macro, usually there's macro and there's micro, right? So you know macro usually means big or giant or just, it's the bigger side of things because macro is big, micro is small. All right. So a macromolecule clearly is a big molecule. Makes sense. So there are 4 macromolecules that, of course, we are very fond of. We just don't necessarily remember that we're fond of these. So you have your carbohydrates, you have your fats, your nucleic acids, and your proteins. Now, initially when you hear all these, the first thing that should pop into your head is nutrition. If it didn't, we need to work on that. So make sure that you especially kind of study this information a little bit harder. But when I said carbohydrates, you should have thought of carbs and you think of what you eat. When I said protein, you should have thought of protein and what you eat. When I said lipids, you should have thought of food and what you eat. The only ones you shouldn't have thought of, well, a lot of kids don't necessarily think of, is when I say nucleic acids. And you'll see why. But nucleic acids also do play a huge role in what you eat. So again, all macromolecules are monomers stacked up together to create a polymer. Polymers equal macromolecules. So I just want to break that down. So remember, macromolecules is a big molecule. All right. So as you can see in this picture here, these are monomers. So if you don't know, the word mono means one. Okay, so of course, as you see, these are one piece. So these are little pieces. Poly means multiple, if you didn't know that. So a monomer is one mer, I guess you want to say. And then a polymer is multiple mers. All right, makes sense. So a monomer will all stack up together like little Legos to create a polymer. All right, and a polymer will come together to create these macromolecules. All right, so let's jump into this. So I believe for your notes for this PowerPoint, you are making sure that you put together your notes chart accordingly. So you, in your element section, you're putting the elements, carbon, oxygen, so on and so forth. In the monomer section, you need to see on the PowerPoint what the monomer is. So what is that single element or atom that is coming together to create the macromolecule itself? Not an atom, that single element that's coming together to create. You need to know the function. So what we actually use that macromolecule for in our bodies. You also needed to know examples. So of course I do give you examples of what those are. And then last but not least, you needed to know the molecule. So you need to know what the molecule look like. Now, I'm going to say now that I do put some pictures of molecules on the slides, but however, I do not put all not all of the slides have the molecule version of, but definitely here for carbs, the molecule, what the actual molecule looks like with the C's, the H's, and the O's is there, but not all 4 of them have it. So please make sure that you type in Google lipid molecule or protein molecule so that you can get a picture of what it looks like, so that you can insert that, because you do need to know what it looks like. So yeah, sorry, let's get this started. So here we are. So a carbohydrate. So here we are. Let's break down this word, carbohydrate. So first of all, you've heard of carbs. That's usually when it comes to dieting and stuff. low carbs and high carbs and all kinds of diets that do carbs. And if you didn't know by now, when you think of carbs, the main foods you should probably mainly pop into your head are breads, pastas, stuff like that. A lot of people don't also realize that sugars, fruits, any sugars are also carbs. So that's how that is. So carbohydrate, when you break it down, it literally will tell you what makes up this macromolecule. Carb for carbon, O for oxygen, and hydrate for hydrogen. And you also think of water with the oxygen and the hydrogen make up water, so hydrate, whichever way you want to remember it. But the elements that make up carbohydrates are carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. So, all right, and they go into in a 1-to-1 format. So if you count all of the hydrogens, for every 2 hydrogen, there's 1 oxygen and there's 1 carbon. So that's what that ratio there means. Right, so what are the building blocks for a carbohydrate? The building block for a carbohydrate, also known as its monomer, is a monosaccharide. So there you go. And those monosaccharides will come together to make, guess what? A polysaccharide. So again, there it goes again. So carbohydrates have a monomer called a monosaccharide. So they're going to build up together to create that polysaccharide. And what do we use carbohydrates in our bodies for? So I'm not sure if you know, but a lot of athletes do this thing called pasta loading, or even before you guys, let's say, I know when I went to Westwood, I played a lot of sports. So I remember at my weightlifting meets, I remember that in the morning time when we first got there, if we had like an early meet, our coach would give us orange juice and he would give us like a bagel or some kind of carb. Most breakfast items are carbs. The reason why is because when you first wake up in the morning, the first thing that you need to do is give your body a source of energy. Clearly I didn't give myself enough because I keep yawning. But you want to give your body a source of energy, and a lot of people believe that in the morning you should probably fuel your body with some type of carbohydrate. Why is this? Because carbohydrates is what our body uses for fast energy. All right, so immediate energy. So whenever you are running, whenever you are doing something, using your energy, you are burning carbs. And the reason why we have that immediate fast energy is because one of our other macromolecules known as lipids, those things are stored. Your body fat, it's stored, and your body doesn't have enough time to break it down and then supply the energy source that you get from the lipid. So instead it keeps the carbohydrates handy as fast energy, and it burns through those faster. So that's why a lot of times people say if you like bread and pasta and stuff, you also may want to be you need to be a big worker outer, because what happens is if you're consuming all these carbs but you are not working out to burn that fast energy off, it then gets stored, it then gets pushed to be a lipid, and it gets stored, and then you gain more body fat. All right, so that's pretty much how that works. So again, carbohydrates are used as a fast energy source. Also with plants, plants use carbohydrates for structural purposes because it's kind of like a starch. Like potatoes and stuff, that they also have starch. But they also use it for like a starch, so they use it to build structure. Plants, and that their carbohydrate is called cellulose. Another thing I wanted to point out is that the easiest way to identify what certain things are carbohydrates is to look at the ending. The easiest way to identify carb in science is the ending ose. Like fructose. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard fructose corn syrup. That's a lot of your sweet candies and stuff like that. Cellulose, that's what's in plants that with their structure. Sucrose is in a lot of fruits, and so on and so forth. So those are different types of carbohydrates that you can find and that are inside of a lot of products. And of course, common foods that are high in carbs: breads, pasta, sugar, fruits. All right. On to the next. So now we have our lipids. And again, lipids are your stored energy. So lipids are used in our bodies as long-term energy. It's also used to build our cell membranes that produce hormones. So of course the main thing you know about is stored energy. So again, here we are. I have a lot of body fat and I'm not ashamed of it. But yes, so the lipids in your body is also known as fats. Your body uses them as stored energy. It will go, let's say you haven't eaten for a couple of days. You're on a fasting diet. Your body will naturally say, okay, she's not eating anything, so you're not consuming any carbs, any fast energy. So your body will naturally say, okay, and it will go down and it will break down all of the body fat, well, not all of it, but it will break down body fat a little bit at a time and use that as energy. Now, why don't we just do this? Why don't we, as humans, just go 3 days without eating so that we naturally stay at an average weight? I'll tell you why. Number one, everybody loves food. But besides that, it can actually be pretty harmful for your body to be breaking down too much of the body fat. Number one, we do use body fat for other purposes, such as warmth and things like that. But also, your body can go into this thing called ketosis if you are breaking down too much body fat. What is ketosis? Ketosis is when your body breaks down the fats, and the byproduct of that is this thing called ketones. And it's very acidic, and it can make your body really sick if it's too high. A lot of people, even with diabetes, this can happen during diabetes if you are either unaware that you're diabetic or you're not taking your insulin. That's another thing, because remember, insulin in diabetes, that breaks down sugar. So it plays a role. So I don't want to get too much into this nursing field of mine because it might confuse you guys. But anyways, long story short, like I said, we want to consume our foods and not just use our body fat, because like I said, it can be harmful to your body if your body starts to break down too much of its body fat at a time. Now, given there is a diet out there, I'm not sure if any of you guys heard of it. It's called the keto diet. And that is actually a pretty popular diet right now. If you go into the grocery store as of late, you probably see, especially in I know at Walmart, by the pharmacy, you see all these keto this and keto that and keto slim fast and keto bread. Well, the keto diet is pretty much a diet that's targeting this whole idea of ketosis. It makes you force your body into going into ketosis so it can break down that body fat, but you kind of have to have a balance with it, because there are some people who have come to the hospital sick because they're on this keto diet and their body has really gotten into ketosis because they went hard in the paint on this diet, and now they're sick because their body's in ketosis and it can really harm you. So it's funny the things we come up with. So anyway, lipids are made up of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, so the same thing as a carbohydrate, which makes sense because they kind of do the same thing. They both supply this energy source. It's just that one is immediate and one is stored. A lipid also has two monomers. It doesn't have just one, so you'll see that the shape of it is the reason why it has two. So it has glycerols and it has fatty acids. So the base will be the glycerol. So I'm so sorry, I keep yelling, guys. So the base will be the glycerol, and then the little branches will be the fatty acids. All right. So again, you already know, I've already talked about that lipids are a stored energy source. They're used for long-term energy. They're also used to build the cell membrane. So when we talk about the cells, we'll talk about the phospholipid membrane. So again, it's this membrane that makes sure that the fluids on the outside of the cell stay on the outside and what's inside stays inside. You can often identify a lipid as an oil or a wax. So of course, lipids, your cooking oils, anything, pretty much things that don't blend with water too well is going to be your lipids. Again, foods that are high in lipids are cooking oil, lard. So when I say lard, I'm talking about Crisco, the really thick oil. I don't know if you guys, I don't even know if people still use Crisco. like not the cooking oil Crisco, but like the actual tub of Crisco. That's lard. And then butter, things like that. Those are all lipids. I want to say that for this one. Yeah. All right. So yeah. If you heard the terms, saturated and unsaturated, if you look on the back of a food label, you'll see all of these words. But if you look on the back of the food label and you go to the total fat section, underneath total fats, it kind of has a subsection where it says saturated fats, unsaturated fats, polysaturated fats, and that's all of these guys. I would go into detail about what's the difference between them all, but it may confuse you guys a little bit more, and it gives you a lot more that you don't necessarily need to know for your exam. But if you are interested, don't worry, I will be glad to shoot you a message about the differences between all the fats. All right, so then we move on to the macromolecules called proteins. Proteins, yay! So I like to start out with actually foods that are common for protein. So your meat, your fish, your eggs, those are all common for protein. A lot of people usually know that off rip. They can identify proteins with the actual foods that they know that are high in proteins. So these are the foods that are high in protein. So proteins are made up of the elements carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. So unlike lipids and carbohydrates that only have the 3, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, we're going to add one more to create a protein. We're going to add a nitrogen. All right. And again, for this on your notes, please make sure, as you can see, the molecule for a protein is not here on this slide. I did not put it on here. So please make sure you do Google molecule of protein, and you will know it's the right molecule because you'll see that it has a carbon, an oxygen, a hydrogen, and a nitrogen on it. So make sure you look out for them. Usually it's identified as C, O, H, and N. All right, proteins have a monomer called an amino acid. All right. Proteins are used within our bodies for several things, and they really are. We are going to get into enzymes after macromolecules, so I'll tell you how proteins associate themselves with that. Regulating cell processes, so there are protein channels on the outsides of cells that regulate what comes in and out of cells. There is transcription, translation. We'll go over that in detail later on in the year, but essentially transcription, translation is the process of your cells reading your DNA and then coding for certain amino acids so that they can build the proteins. That is what this is showing here. A ribosome is also a protein. It reads the RNA or the DNA, and it creates these little balls called amino acids, your monomers. And then those monomers all stack up together to create a polymer or a polypeptide in the case of a protein. So this is a polypeptide, and it creates that to.
Good morning, families. Happy Monday. A friendly reminder happy Tuesday. A friendly reminder to be reporting to your duty locations at this time. Once again, please report to your duty location at this time.
And it will all come together to then create a protein to do what it needs to do. And of course, proteins also help the body with fighting certain diseases. They help your immune system. Certain parts of your immune system are proteins. All right, so that is that for that one. And then last but not least, we have the macromolecule called a nucleic acid. So again, remember I said that all of them probably initially you think of food when you first hear it, but for nucleic acid, I want you to think of DNA. So a lot of people are like, what? They know what DNA is. They know that that's, how you're created. That's your genes. They know that part, but they don't actually know what DNA stands for. It is an acronym, so it does stand for something. So deoxyribonucleic acid, and then RNA, which is like half of DNA, stands for ribonucleic acid. So keep in mind that the NA and the NA in both of those stand for this macromolecule, nucleic acid. Nucleic acids are essentially what DNA and RNA are. They're nucleic acids. So nucleic acids are made up of the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So notice all our macromolecules are made up of these 3. Nitrogen, so remember we added that nitrogen on with the protein. And then we added one more when it comes to nucleic acid, phosphorus. So they have all of that. used in the body to store and transmit hereditary or genetic information. So again, your DNA and your RNA, they're used with your genes, how you're genetically made up. A nucleic acid monomer is called a nucleotide, and this is a picture of a nucleotide. So nucleotides are here, of what you know as a double helix to represent DNA. But of course, nucleotides is what actually makes up the DNA. So they're the monomer, they're the building blocks to a nucleic acid. So that nucleotide has 3 parts to it. So again, and those 3 parts are these guys. So I just want to show you the nitrogen. So nitrogen's in there. So this is nitrogenous base. You guys should know that nitrogenous bases as adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. So A to T, C to G. That whole thing, we'll go into detail in that more later on. The phosphorus, here's the phosphate group that it has on it. And then it has a 5-carbon sugar. Notice that word sugar. And what is sugar? Sugar is a carbohydrate. And what 3 elements make up a carbohydrate? That carbon, that hydrogen, and that oxygen. All right. So that is where the carbon, hydrogen. So they have the nitrogenous base, they have the phosphorus group, and then they have that 5-carbon sugar. And I know you see carbon, so you're like, okay, where's the hydrogen and oxygen? It's a sugar molecule. So sugar is a carb, and carbs are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So that's where those 3 come in. All right. And I want to say that is it. Again, so I gave it one of the use, the element, examples of it. So again, the examples of a nucleic acid is DNA and RNA. And of course, this is another one where, well, I mean, there are 2 pictures of what the molecule looks like. The molecule looks like that. But I kind of want a more detailed picture of, it kind of these being put together. Instead of just a double helix, because sometimes it can misrepresent for some people. So you can look it up. Like I said, it pretty much looks like the molecule version of a nucleic acid, and you can type that molecule of nucleic acid. It should look like a double helix essentially, but it looks like these forming a double helix. This is just a common drawing of a double helix, but there's a lot more detail to it in a molecular form. And that is it for today. Oh, and this is, of course, the Amoeba Sisters. I love them. They go over macromolecules, and they do a really good job of it. So please watch the video, because it will also help you understand, and it'll help you for the memory piece about macromolecules. All right? Later.